August 29, 2021. You might remember. Joe Biden probably does not recall. He does not know that today is Thursday. But, however, what happened on that day, we will never forget. That is the day that the remains of 13 U.S. service members that were killed in that suicide bombing near the Kabul airport arrived at Dover Airfield for a dignified transfer. Now, President Joe Biden was standing on the tarmac. Remember, he was checking his watch again, and again. It was so insulting, embarrassing, multiple times, pretty disgraceful. But it was the culmination of Joe Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and frankly, one of the most shameful, humiliating moments in American history. We have a few new ones, the Chinese spy balloon and the drone shot out of the sky. We'll get to that. Now, despite the gravity of the situation, the Biden administration, they only waited until today. Today, for people that may not be of the Christian faith, is Holy Thursday. Tomorrow is Good Friday. Sunday is Easter Sunday. Now, just before the Easter Sunday weekend, they finally released their assessment of what went wrong. And they're trying to bury the story and not let us figure out what actually went wrong. They're not telling us the truth. In fact, the assessment from Biden is so dishonest, it's something that we have come to expect from all the administration, because they pretty much lie about everything. If the dog bites, bee stings, feeling sad, who do you blame? Donald Trump. There you go. Now, when you raise your kids, think about this. All kids do silly things, right? They make mistakes. Do you get more mad at the mistake, or do you get mad when they try to insult your intelligence and lie to you? Well, and blame others for their decision and their behavior. Well, that defines Joe Biden and his entire administration and all the hacks that speak for him. Now, they blame Donald Trump for COVID, for bank failures, the Ohio train derailment, gas prices, the border, really? Okay. The national debt, inflation, the war in Ukraine, spy balloons, and so much more. Nothing is ever Joe's fault. Just listen to this explainer from John Kirby. Take a look.
Nowhere in here does there appear to be any expression of accountability or mistake by either the president himself or others. Is there any for what happened?
I would argue that the very fact that we voluntarily, the agencies voluntarily decided to go conduct after-action reviews, nobody told them to do that.
Well, who's going to get fired over this?
Peter, the purpose of the document that we're putting out today is to sort of collate the chief reviews and findings of the agencies that did after-action reviews. It's not the purpose of it is not accountability.
All right, according to Biden, Biden did nothing wrong. He accepts no responsibility, frankly, for anything. Now, he's learned nothing at all also, and it's really important, not to assign blame here. Well, except for all the times that the report blamed Donald Trump. They kept blaming Donald Trump. He wasn't president during the chaotic withdrawal. Not a single American was killed by the Taliban in Afghanistan in combat in the last 18 months when Donald Trump was president. And meanwhile, Joe Biden had been sworn in for 6 months when he ordered this withdrawal. But according to the administration's findings, it's all Donald Trump's fault. And during the transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration, the outgoing administration provided, they say, no plan for how to conduct the final withdrawal. In other words, how could Joe Biden ever possibly come up with his own plan before ordering the withdrawal? Maybe that's too much to ask from your commander-in-chief. Now, the report also accuses Trump of emboldening the Taliban and not leaving enough troops for Biden to pull out. Well, Joe, you could have put some back in. And as for the billions in military equipment that Joe left behind, billions and billions of it for the Taliban, well, that's Biden's fault? Apparently not. Take a look.
In looking through this, it doesn't seem to address the $7 billion in military hardware and technology that was left in Afghanistan for the Taliban. The president took office in January. The withdrawal happened in August. Does the president take responsibility for leaving all or some of that?
You know who was responsible for that equipment? The Afghans.
The Afghans are responsible. Maybe if you would have planned it properly, you would have pulled them out, and maybe 13 Americans would be alive today if you were a real commander-in-chief, if you knew what day of the week it was, and that you came up with your own plan instead of blaming everybody else. What do you get mad at? Your kids. You tell your kids, don't eat the cookie. And then all of a sudden they say, okay, I'm not going to eat the cookie. Then you come back 5 minutes later, there's chocolate all over their face. You ask them, did they eat the cookie? No, I did not. Donald Trump ate the cookie. You know, because that's what they take responsibility for nothing. And by the way, John Kirby just doesn't know what all the fuss is about today. He actually said that he didn't see, get this, any chaos at all during this withdrawal. Let me remind him. Take a look.
And so for all this talk of chaos, I just didn't see it, not from my perch. At one point during the evacuation, there was an aircraft taking off full of people, Americans and Afghans alike, every 48 minutes. And not one single mission was missed. So I'm sorry, I just won't buy the whole argument of chaos. It was tough in the first few hours. You would expect it to be. There was nobody at the airport.
Nobody at the airport. Oh. That looks like people at the airport to me. Are you serious? The airport was surrounded by Afghans and American citizens dying to get out, believing in the promise of their president that no American would be left behind. And you had ISIS-linked terrorists, all while the Taliban fighters were running security at the checkpoints. And it took days for desperate Americans and foreign nationals to even get inside the airport, if they were lucky, and they were then on their own, with many literally paying for private security to keep them alive during the entire ordeal. Babies were being tossed, remember this, over airport walls. A moat of raw sewage formed around the airport. At one point, dozens of Afghans rushing the tarmac. Look at this, remember? Oh, well, John Kirby said this didn't happen. What you're seeing didn't happen. And then they attempted to cling to the outside of a transport plane because they were that desperate to get the hell out of hell? Are you kidding me? And after days of all of this chaos, ISIS carried out a suicide bombing, killing well over 100 Afghans and 13 U.S. service members. Now, those that did manage to escape, they were packed into cargo planes like this with virtually no security vetting at all whatsoever. But John Kirby, Joe Biden, they're not able to see the chaos from that vantage point. Apparently, they don't pay attention. If they'd only watch this show, their IQ would go up 100% immediately. Now, of course, many American citizens didn't get inside the airport before Biden closed up shop, left them all behind, and abandoned our Americans behind enemy lines only days after vowing to stay until every single American was safely let out of the country. You might remember Joe's promise. To this day, Americans are still trapped in Afghanistan, with some, according to, even last week, Winkin' Blinken, your Secretary of State, he admitted over 175 Americans are there, and some of them are hostages. Take a look.
Mr. Secretary, how many American citizens and licensed permanent residents are in Afghanistan today, and are any of them currently being held hostage by the Taliban?
Congressman, there are several Americans who are being detained by the Taliban. We are working to secure their freedom.
Later, he said several, he defined several as 175, and I doubt that's the real number also. These Americans now have been trapped for years behind enemy lines, some held hostage, while Biden does nothing to free them. Now, sadly, this display of weakness has very far-reaching consequences. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, they are all emboldened, and Biden has now abdicated America's leadership role on the world stage. That's why they're taking full advantage. That's why little Rocket Man is back, shooting off his new missiles into the Sea of Japan. That's why Iran is now enriching uranium faster than ever. That is why China flew that spy balloon over the continental U.S. for days, circling back to collect data on our nuclear and military sites. And successfully, we now know they did it successfully, and we're transmitting that data back to China in real time. That's why Russia, well, they invaded Ukraine. You think that they didn't think that Joe Biden would do a thing. Taking out an American drone over international waters, what were those consequences? What were the consequences for the communist Chinese? Nothing, nothing, and nothing. And now Russia has detained yet another American, a Wall Street Journal reporter. I hope we pray for him and all the people stuck in Afghanistan, and we're praying for their safe return. In the past 2 years, this world under Joe Biden has become a far more dangerous place, and I fear it's only going to get worse. And it's no wonder that only a third of Americans think that Joe Biden deserves to be reelected. Look at this fake news CNN poll. Even they had to report at least part of the story. A majority of Democrats, they don't want Joe. They want another option. Kamala Harris, go right ahead.